do not all answer at once. Sir?
With all the successes that you've had, what would you consider your greatest failure or disappointment?
What is my greatest failure and my greatest disappointment? Well, sir, firstly, if you were to ask me my greatest success, I have no moment of hesitation. It was simply acquiring the hand of Mrs. Jefferson in marriage. I have always believed that harmony in the marriage state is the first chapter in the book of wisdom. And it is by a very simple formula. It is simply two people making it their object and effort to make the other happy. You cannot fail.
Amen.
But most unfortunate, sir, we were only married 10 short years. She provided 6 children. We could never understand why childbirth was so complicated for us. She craved sugar more than usual. Our babies weighed heavier consecutively to the extent that our last child, little Lucy Elizabeth, weighed 12 pounds at birth. Now, Mrs. Jefferson did not survive, but not before I promised her that I would never marry again. You know, sir, my lament in my private life is that we did not understand her ailment, that we did not have a system of education or improvement in medicine and doctrine that would know how to attend to it. The only reconciliation, sir, in that lament, that failure to understand, is that she did not have to live and suffer as I have the death of 5 of our 6 children. The happiness of my autumn years rests upon the slender thread of my dear daughter Martha alone, and perhaps even that cord of parental pleasure may be severed me, but I cannot spend my time weeping or ruminating upon the past and such malady. I must continue with the hope, sir, for the future, and realize indeed that as the family of man we must share our concern for our fellow man, for not a one of us is without affliction. I would say my greatest lament publicly is what I have already asserted, that in my constant efforts to bring this abominable commerce between slave and master to an end may not be realized before I shed my mortal coil. Many, without any respect to my people or for their future, are to say, Jefferson, free your people, set the example. They know best, particularly the Federalists. After all, who do the Federalists represent?
The merchants?
Our farmers?
No.
The counting houses. The counting houses. And they know well as they continue to chastise me, my people are no longer my property, they're the property of my creditors. They're entailed by my creditors. I am hopeful, before I shed my mortal coil, that their industry, for they operate the nailery at my mansion house, they sell the produce at market for their benefit, they cultivate the crops about their cabins, they sell that at market for that they might be able, some at least, to purchase their own liberty if I fail and they have to be sold to make up the debt of my estate. I'm greatly in debt, sir, as is indeed the entire South. We continue to fall in arrears. Our economy is 1/2 of what continues to accrue above the Mason and Dixon. Our population is 1/2. We now have fewer electors in the Congress of our nation than we are seeing up north. What is our future going to be? You know, back in 1779, I introduced into the new Virginia House of Delegates 2 bills amongst the 126 that I placed for revising the old monarchical code to suit a democratical republic. Bills 51 and 52 called for ending the importation of slaves and allowing a master to free all of his people. Before that, only 2 slaves could be freed in 1 year. They could not belong to the same master. They had to have a skill. They had to know how to read and write to make for their livelihood. Once the decision was made by the governor's council, all men of property, then the Papers of Freedom entitled these former slaves to live outside the political economy of Virginia, so they might not be an instigation. My bill said a master could free all of his people. Do you know that was argued and debated during the time I was in France and was resolved before my bill for religious freedom? 1785, Virginia finally ended the importation of slaves and allowed a master to free all of his people. I remember Dr. Carter was the first, a good friend of mine in Williamsburg. First year he freed about, I think it was 40. The second year was about 50. The third year he completed the entire abolition, but then, lest we forget, he was one of the wealthiest men in all of Virginia. Many of his neighbors proffered the statement I made earlier. Jefferson may have succeeded in this bill, but it will not provoke me to extricate my rightful property.